For this project, you're going to need your yarns, and depending what size you make, that's how much yarn you're going to need. So make sure you have enough. A crochet hook that's compatible with the size of the yarn, and 4 stitch markers. I like to use these ones. If you don't have ones like these, you could use a hairpin or a regular safety pin. This sweater is going to be worked from the top to the bottom, starting with the yoke, and we're going to divide the stitches in this manner. For example, I'm going to make 48 stitches in total at the beginning, and it's going to be divided into 5 parts. 2 for the front, 2 for the sleeves, and 1 for the back. So if you want to adjust it to a bigger size, then make sure you have a number that's divisible by 3. Like this, you can divide it into 3 parts, which will be the back, the sleeves, and the front. Since the sleeves both together equal the same as the back, and the front pieces all together, both together equal the same as the back as well. So we have 16, 16, and 16 all together for the 48 stitches. Once you have your number of stitches calculated up, now we can begin our sweater. We begin by making a starting chain with all the stitches that we need for the beginning. So I'm going to make 48 stitches. And we're going to place our stitch markers on the 4 points around the yoke. So 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I'm going to add 1 stitch and place in it the first stitch marker. Now for the second batch of 8 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 stitch and place in it a stitch marker. Now for the back, which is going to be 16 stitches. 4, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1 stitch, place a stitch marker. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Add a stitch, the last marker, and I'm going to finish off with another 8 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On our second row, we are going to begin our increases. So chain 1 and turn. Beginning from the second chain, we are going to make single crochets up until the stitch with the marker. 1, 2, 8, 3. Once you've reached a stitch, the first stitch with the marker, I'm going to remove the marker, and in this stitch we are going to increase. Here we're going to make 3 single crochets into 1 stitch. So 1, 2, and 3. Like that. I'm going to replace my stitch marker in the middle stitch of the 3 that we just made. So that means the second stitch back from the hook. Right over there, which this is the middle stitch. We're going to repeat that again by every stitch marker. So continue on. 1, 2, 8. Now I've reached the next stitch marker. Again, remove it and make 3 single crochets into that stitch. 1, 2 and 3. Replace the stitch marker in the middle stitch, so the second one from under the hook over there. Continue doing these increases by every stitch marker that you come to. The next row is going to be just plain crocheting all along, but we need to make sure to replace each stitch marker in the correct stitch of where it is. So chain 1 and turn and begin making single crochets up until the first marker. And when you reach a stitch with a marker, simply remove it, make that stitch, and then replace the marker into the stitch where it was. Do this for every stitch marker that you come across. The next row is going to be an increase row. So chain 1, turn, and crochet up until your first stitch marker. Once you've reached it, remove it, and again we're going to make 3 stitches into that one stitch. So 1, 2, and 3, and replace the stitch marker in the middle one, so the second one from the hook over there, like that. Now we're going to do the same for the next stitch marker. Remove it, make 3 stitches into that one stitch, 1, 2, 3, and replace your stitch marker in the middle stitch. This is how we're going to make the increase rows. So this is how we're going to continue crocheting our yoke, making 1 row with increases and then 1 row without, making sure to place the stitch markers in their correct place so we have it clearly marked, and continue doing this 1 row with increases, 1 row without, until your yoke is big enough to divide for the sleeves. So I'll meet you back when my yoke is big enough. Once your yoke is big enough, now we are going to work on the body of the sweater and leave the sleeves to be picked up later. So begin your row just as you would. And stop at the stitch right before the stitch marker. Now we are going to leave all of these stitches off for the sleeve, and we're going to pick up from the next one, the one right after the second stitch marker. So this one over here, we're going to pick that one up and continue the row. When you reach the next marker, do exactly the same thing. Stop right before the marker and pick up right after the second marker and finish up the row. So what we've done is that we have made one row with just the stitches that we need for the body of the sweater, leaving off the stitches of the sleeves. So now we're going to continue back and forth on the body of the sweater, making regular rows, no increases, no nothing, just plain crocheting back and forth until our sweater is long enough. So I'll meet you back when the body of the sweater is done. Once the body of the sweater is long enough, now we can cut our yarn, leaving a little bit of a tail. Pull it through that loop to secure. And now we can move on to the next step, which is the sleeves. So beginning with your first sleeve, we are going to pick up all of these stitches around, beginning with this first one with the stitch marker. You can remove the marker and begin crocheting from that stitch. For the first few rows, I'm going to continue placing the stitch markers so that we should remember where is the first and the last stitch. Once you've reached the second stitch marker, you can remove that one for now. Crochet that one stitch, and then at the end of every row we are going to make a slip stitch in the first stitch of the other side. Like this, our sleeve will be closed. Just like that. And now turn your work, and beginning with that first stitch of the sleeve, which is right after the slip stitch one, that's going to be the first stitch of the row. I'm going to place my stitch marker into here so that I remember that it's the first one. And now I'm crocheting back till the other side. Again, when you've reached the last stitch, you could tell by the stitch marker, you make a single crochet into that one, and then a slip stitch in the first of the other side. Like that. Turn your work. Begin your next row from right after the slip stitch, so over here, and replace your marker so you remember which one was the first stitch. Continue doing this until your sleeve is long enough, and I'll meet you back there. Once your sleeve is long enough, you're going to finish off with a last slip stitch to finish off the last row. Then you can cut your yarn, leaving a little bit of a tail. Pull it through the loop. And now you can remove the stitch markers. Then we are going to repeat the exact same process for the second sleeve. Make sure that you are picking up the same amount of stitches as the first sleeve, and that you make the same amount of rows as the first sleeve, so that they should be identical. I'll meet you back when the second sleeve is done. Once the second sleeve is done, now all that's left to do is to make a small button band on both sides, one side for the buttons and one side with the buttonholes. Beginning from the bottom, we are going to be picking up stitches as follows. We can see that there are rows going this way from where we've crocheted, and so we are going to be picking up one row from two sides and the next row one side, two sides of the next row, one side of the next row. So let's begin over here on the first row. Insert your hook and secure the yarn. Now I'll pick up two for this row, so find where you could pick up over here, 1 and 2. And then for next row, we're going to pick up just 1, 1. Next row, we're going to pick up 2, 1 and 2. And by next row, we're going to pick up only 1. So we continue on this way, all the way up, 2 for a row, and then 1 for a row. One, and let's finish off right over here on the top with one last stitch. Okay, so we've picked up all these stitches on the side. Now we're going to crochet another 2 rows for the button band. So chain 1, turn, and now we have the stitches already clear. So crocheting back and then back up. Once you've finished the 3rd row, now we can cut the yarn. And here we finished the first side of the button band. And before we go on to the next side, we are going to do 2 things. First, we're going to count how many stitches we had picked up so that we know how many to pick up on this side to make it even. And also we are going to find where we want to position the buttons so that we can know how many and how to space out the buttonholes. So first let's count how many stitches. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 4, 6, 8, 20, 2, 4, 6, 8. So I have 29 stitches picked up. So I'm going to pick up also 29 on this side. Now grab your buttons. So find out how many buttons you want to have and how spaced out you want them to be. And then we can divide evenly the stitches, which will be between each buttonhole. So for the first row on the other side, we're going to pick up the stitches just like we did over here. In the same way, making sure we have the same amount of stitches. So one row picking up 2, and then the next row picking up 1. That's 1. Now 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1. Now for the second row, we are going to add the buttonholes. For the amount of buttons that I'm making, I'm going to be making a buttonhole after every 5 stitches. But if you're doing buttons that are more spaced apart or less, then you might have a different number of stitches in between each. For this first one, I'm going to do only 2 stitches and then a buttonhole. And then for the rest, I'm going to do every 5 stitches. So the way we make a hole is like this. You crochet normally until the place where you need to make a hole. So I'm going to do 1 and 2 stitches. And now I'm going to do like this. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, and then continue crocheting from the next stitch on. Over there, like that, and that created a little buttonhole. If you're using bigger buttons, then you can do chain 2 or chain 3 and then skipping the same amount of stitches that you chain. I'm using smallish buttons, so I'm only going to do 1. So chain 1, skip 1, and now I'm going to do 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now I'm going to make the next buttonhole, so chain 1, skip 1, and begin from the next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, chain 1, skip 1, and here is for the last button, and another 2 stitches by the end. There we go. And now we're going to make one last row, just like we did 3 rows on this side. We're going to make 3 rows all together on this side. So chain 1 and turn. Now here I have 1 and 2 stitches, and then I have the first buttonhole. So what I'm going to do is, to make the hole a bit more pronounced, instead of going into the stitch, I'm going to go into the hole what it made over here from the chain 1 and make there a single crochet like that, and that makes the hole a bit more pronounced. So we'll do that by every buttonhole. When you reach the end, just cut your yarn. And here we have these 2 sides of the button band, one side with the buttonholes and one side without. Now all that's left to do is sewing in all the ends and sewing on the buttons. Under the sleeves where we picked up the stitches, it might have created a bit of a hole. So when you sew in that end, you could close up that hole as you're sewing it in.